Hello everyone and welcome to game 54 of the 100 game match between Leela Chess0 and Stockfish in the TCEC Superfinals. We've already seen two of the games I believe from this Superfinals. Last one was game 49, this is game 54 and it's really an impressive game. I'm sure you're all going to enjoy it. Before I show you the game, I would just like to say that I have received my copy of The Game Changer by Matthew Sadler and Natasha Reagan. It's a book about AlphaZero's groundbreaking chess strategies and the promise of AI, with a foreword by Garry Kasparov and the introduction by DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis. I still haven't read it, so I'm very much looking forward to it. And just so you know, this is not a paid promotion or something like that. I only promote things I enjoy myself on this channel. So that being said, let's check out this very nice game. Leela has the white pieces, and like we already mentioned, in this 100 game match, the openings are pre-arranged, so we're gonna discuss that as the game goes. In this game, we had d4, d5, c4, and c6, the Slav defense. Knight to f3, knight to f6, we have e3, and bishop to f5. One of the nicer ways to decide what to do with your light square bishop, as that's usually black's biggest problem. We have knight to c3, and now comes e6. So now you have this very nice triangle here. The bishop is out of the box, and white will of course do everything it can to harass it. So immediately we have knight to h4 going for the bishop, and now bishop to g4 attacking white's queen. We have queen to b3. And now, as the b7 pawn is under attack, the bishop is no longer guarding it, queen to c7, defending the pawn. We have h3, now forcing the bishop back, we have bishop to h5, and now this is how it works in this 100 game match. First, Leela has the white pieces, they play this opening, then Stockfish has the white pieces, they play this exact same opening, and Leela has to defend it with the black pieces. And here, Stockfish in this position played bishop to d2, and it's a known move. Humans have played this move in this position also. But Leela goes for g4, and I always find it amazing how both Leela and Alpha always find a way to just push pawns, just h4, h5, g4, g5, just make everything open, and you know, just leave your king in the center like it doesn't matter. But okay, bishop to g6, it was played in human chess plenty of times. g5 now, attacking the knight, and first an in-between move, a nice Zwischenzug, d captures on c4, attacking white's queen. We have bishop captures, grabbing the pawn while developing a piece, knight to d5, getting the knight out of the way, and now knight captures on g6, h captures on g6, and now e4. Again, with an attack on the knight, knight captures on c3, b captures on c3, and there were 3 games in the database I found that reached this exact same position. In all 3 games, rook to h4 was the move, going after this e4 pawn. And it's a very rich position. In one of the games, white won, in one of the games, black won, and one game was a draw. But here, Stockfish goes for a different move, knight to d7. And now it's only moves for 14, but we already have a completely new game. So let's see how Leela goes about this. First, bishop to e2. A very nice move and a very useful move, but you'll see later just what it does. For one, it doesn't allow b5 to come with an attack on the bishop, so white can always react with a4 to b5. And on the other hand, it also keeps an eye on this rook to h4 move, which we already mentioned humans played, as now, for example, rook to h4, you can just lock that rook in with bishop to g4. So bishop to d6, a very nice developing square for the bishop, but also it kind of invites Leela to go for e5, as now white is really controlling a lot of very important central squares, so Leela does go e5. And okay, bishop back to e7, putting pressure on the g5 pawn, and now king to f1. Now Leela, although decided not to castle, will go king g2 to defend the h3 pawn, and then the rook will be free to enter the game. b5, and now comes a4. It's a very principled move where black has played b5 to go a4. You want to trade your even less central pawn for his less central pawn, but here it loses a pawn. But it's amazing how beautiful this pawn sacrifice is, but you'll see what I mean. Leela goes for a4. We have queen to a5 now. Now you cannot capture because the rook on a1 is undefended. We have king to g2. Leela just you know, doesn't care what's going on here, and knight to b6. Stockfish now is ready to capture this pawn, and there's not much you can do to defend it. We have queen to c2, a beautiful move that you'll see very soon just how powerful it is. Stockfish decides it's okay to capture the pawn. We have knight captures on a4, and now comes bishop to f3. So what's Leela's compensation for the pawn here? For the moment, the threat is bishop captures on c6, delivering a check and winning the rook on a8. So queen back to c7, defending, and now comes h4. Preparing h5. As you see, the queen is attacking the g6 pawn, and this will be one of the reasons why most of black's ideas don't work. For example, you might think, okay, I want to push c5, I can't, my rook is on a8, I could play something like this and then push c5, but it doesn't work because the queen is on c2. For example, bishop d2, and now if black pushes c5, white has d5. And after e captures, now e6, and now you see that black's position slowly but surely crumbles. For example, if you capture, then you get queen captures on g6, and it's all over. King comes here, rook a comes to e1, you're just going to pile up on this pawn, you're winning the g7 pawn, then you're pushing h5, h6, this is completely over. So after h4, we have queen to d7, and now comes h5, again going for this g6 pawn, the idea of queen being on c2. Another nice thing about the queen on c2, when white pushes c4, black will not be able to recapture, as the queen also pressures the knight, even after the rook moves from a1. G captures on h5, you can't really allow white to capture here. So we have g captures on h5, and now not recapturing, you could do that, but even better g6, just make things happen immediately. Again, f captures is not possible due to queen captures, and now you will either have to run away, and then after queen captures on g7, you're also losing this pawn, and everything just crumbles. Bishop is coming to g4, you are capturing the e6 pawn, or if you go to f8, then just bishop captures, and there's very little you can do about this queen f7 checkmate. You could play bishop d8, okay, queen guards it, but now rook h3, the rook is coming to f3. Queen e7, now comes rook f3 check, king moves, and now black is either getting checkmated or loses the queen. So a very difficult position for black. We have f6, keeping black alive, but allowing white to have this beautiful pawn on g6. We have e captures on f6, and now bishop captures. G captures seems to give you more control here, but the g7 is just too powerful. Rook here, you get bishop captures with check, king d8, but now queen here, attacking the rook, and after you connect rooks, then finally bishop f7 will either win the rook or you will move it, and white will promote into a queen, and then black will eventually have to give up the exchange. So after e captures on f6, we have bishop captures, and finally now rook comes to e1, preparing to put pressure on the e6 pawn, for example, queen b3, and then capturing here. And it's interesting, can black do something like castles and then just bring the rook over here and try to defend everything? Yeah, you can, but then you have this pawn on h5, you can always just go bishop a3, attack the rook. After rook moves, the bishop captures, and it's very easy to imagine this queen creeping up all the way here, the bishop controlling the dark squares. It will be very unpleasant for the black king. So after rook e1, we have rook to f8, and now queen b3, going after this pawn, like we said. Bishop to e7, now comes c4. Again, we mentioned you cannot capture because the knight would be lost. So much for that knight on a4. Rook to c8, and now comes c captures on b5. C captures on b5, and now what do you do with the e6 pawn? Feel free to pause the video and try to figure out what to do about this position. I'll give you a couple of seconds as usual. For those of you who decided rook captures on e6, that's not gonna fly, because although it seems like, yeah, white is controlling much more space, the pawn is here controlling f7, you want to play something like rook captures, play bishop a3, go other rook on a1, just double rooks. It doesn't work because of, if you capture, black has this very nice tactic of rook captures on f3. Now you cannot capture with the queen because you have to keep an eye on your rook, and of course if king captures, then you have this very unfortunate rook to c3 check. Stockfish would be very happy, as he would win the queen here, and finally there would be some use of this knight on a4 other than grabbing that pawn. So after c captures on b5, we have queen captures on e6. This is the strongest. Queen captures, now rook captures, and now we have rook to f6. And this move, Leela's next move reminded me of the Fight Club. That's why I named the video like this. I believe it's Tyler Durden, or it's Durden, who mentions at one point, be careful of the things you own, or they might end up owning you. So here it seems that you can either capture here, or you can move the rook and give away your g6 pawn. And this g6 pawn is basically the thing that will end up owning you if you don't just, you know, leave it be. For example, if you capture, then okay, the pawn stays alive, but after bishop captures, this pawn is pressured, you have to defend it. Now comes rook c4, and it seems like black untangled. It's actually black who's pushing now. So here Leela found a different idea. Rook to e5, giving up the g6 pawn with check. And okay, rook captures, and now king to f1. And now you see that white has so many threats. Bishop captures on h5, one of them, winning the rook on g6. So you have to do something about this. King to f8, but now rook captures on h5, threatening rook h8 check and winning the rook on c8. King f7 defending, and now not going for material right away. First, bishop to d5 check. And now, if you go something like king to f8, then of course rook to h8 will be checkmate. You don't want to allow this. If you try something like king to f6, not really possible because it loses the rook. Bishop e4 wins the rook here. Rook g4, you get rook f5 check. King e6, and now you get rook e5 check. King back, and now f3 will win the rook. Rook g3, you can just attack it here, and even if bishop d6 just captures, and you will be down a piece by the end of all of the exchanges. So after bishop d5 check, king to e8 was played, and now first bishop to d2. You do want to get your last piece, the rook and bishop, into the game as well. a6 now, defending the b5 pawn, and now rook to e1. Now white will make very nice use of this pin. And here we have king to d7. You don't want to allow this pin to exist. Rook e5 just doubles rooks. Bishop is coming to b4. It would be too dangerous. So bishop to e4 here, attacking the rook. Now Leela will start a rook hunt with the bishop pair. When it's an open board and you have a bishop pair, black has loose rooks. Mostly you can do something about this. Rook to f6, and now comes rook to d5 check. And this is the critical moment of the game, but not a critical moment of the game where black can actually do something. It's a critical moment of the game where black is just dead. Because whatever black does now with the king, let's say he goes king c6, you get rook c1 check. King has to go to b7 to defend the rook here, rook to d7 check. King b8, now you get rook to b7 check, and here you're just getting checkmated. On the other hand, after this rook to d5 check, you could decide to go something like king c7. But still, bishop f5 attacks the rook and also the bishop that's undefended here, and pretty much whatever you do, you can defend the bishop, but then comes rook d7 check. After you move the king, then comes bishop g4. The threat is just winning the piece here, and after it's defended, now comes d5 check. King c5, and now rook c1 check. King will have to move, and now d6 just either wins the bishop or the rook on f7. So not possible either. So not working. What else can you do? If you go king e6, you get bishop g2, a discovered check while keeping an eye on your rook. King f7, and now rook d7. Again, the threat is winning the bishop. Rook e8 defending, and now bishop to b4. One of the reasons why bishop to d2 was played, to allow this attack. And if rook e6, then just bishop d5 is just beautiful here. I mean, not anything you can do. So after rook d5, we said doesn't work, and lastly we have king e8, but again rook e5, just doubling up here on the e file. Black will not be able to repel this. King f8, you get bishop to g5 now, attacks the rook, rook to f7, and now bishop to f5. Again, we have a triple attack here, and the rook here is under attack. After rook e8 or something, you just get bishop g6, and it's all over. Black has too much to deal with. You can either just give up material or try a very nice checkmate like this. So any of the lines for the king are not possible. So Stockfish decided for bishop to d6, but this just allows Leela to win the exchange straight up. Bishop f5 check wins the exchange, rook captures, and now knight b2. So here Leela is down a pawn but up the exchange, and okay, black does have two connected pass pawns on the queen side, but you know, a rook is a rook. King e2, we have king to e6, and now comes rook g5, going after the pawn, and here black will have to go into somewhat of a passive position to keep an eye on the g7 pawn. Bishop to f8, and now comes rook f5 check, king g8, and now bishop to e3. Now the next idea for white is to grab some of the pawns on the queen side. b4, Stockfish starts pushing the passed pawn, rook c1 now. The bishop is defending the rook, so Leela would like to exchange rooks. Rook b8, not allowing this, bishop to f4, attacking the rook, rook e8 check, king to d2, and now comes rook to d8. Attacking the pawn, bishop to e3, and now bishop to e7. So Stockfish is very comfortable here. He would like to keep it a draw, but we have rook to c6 now, attacking the a6 pawn, and there's not much you can do to defend it. You could try something like rook to a8, but then you're just in a passive position, and Leela starts pushing the passed pawn. Bishop to f6 was played, and now Stockfish tries to give up the a6 pawn for the d4 pawn, but simply king c2, attacking the knight here. Knight a4, and only now rook captures on a6 with an attack on the knight. Here we have knight to c3. So here we have a position where both Leela and Stockfish have 2 pawns, but Leela is up the exchange, and this is only move 53. So this is one of the things when we first saw, I believe it was the first game between Alpha 0 and Stockfish, where also Alpha had a winning endgame, but Stockfish tortured him for like 100 more moves, and that's how you should approach chess. When you have a position like this, just torture your opponent, just make him think, make him work for his meal. And that's what Stockfish does. But okay, queen d3, king d3, Leela doesn't mind. King to f7, and now comes rook f to a5. King to g6, and now we have rook to b6, going after the b4 pawn. This is the next step of the plan. We have knight to d5, and now comes rook b to b5 first, and knight to e7. Here Stockfish wants to trick Leela into capturing so as to win at least one rook. Leela is not interested. Rook to a1. We have rook to d6 now. And rook captures on b4 finally. Now Leela is up the exchange and the pawn, and now it's only a matter of time. Knight c6 attacks the rook, rook a4, we have king here, rook b1, knight e5 check, king goes back, knight to f7, and rook to d1. Rook to b6, and now rook to d2, not allowing any checks, king g6, and now king to f3. Knight g5 check, bishop captures, and now rook d1. Leela was able to exchange one more piece, and now with such a huge advantage, it's merely a matter of improving your king's position and pushing the pawn. Rook f6 check, king g2, bishop f4, rook d3, king f5, and now rook b3. King to d6, king f3, bishop g5, rook d3, bishop prevents rook a5 check, and now rook b4, preparing rook b5 check. We have rook here, king goes back, rook d6, and now king to e3. Rook to d5, rook to d1, bishop to e7, attacking the rook, rook a4, and bishop to f6. So for the moment, Stockfish still torturing Leela. We have rook to c4, preparing rook to c5 to exchange rooks. So bishop to e7, not allowing it. Rook to b1 now, trying to get the other rook up. Bishop to f6, rook b to b4. Again, rook to c5 is a threat to exchange rooks, so king has to move. King to e4, rook moves, and now rook to a4. d5 was probably an option immediately, but Leela wants to prepare everything perfectly. So improving the position slowly by slowly, even f3, bishop f6, we have rook to b7, rook a4, rook b1, king e4, king g6, rook a3, we have rook b8, now comes rook d3. Rook e8 check, king goes to f4, bishop, king h5, and now king g3. Rook d8, d5 now finally starts pushing the passed pawn, and in here it's merely a matter of technique, which Leela does not lack. So the king is coming up the board, and here rook e6 attacks bishop, rook checks, king attacks bishop, bishop e7, rook d to e3, and here after bishop to g5, Stockfish resigned the game. As now there's really nothing to do, the king is already very close, you can just move the rook, put it behind a pass pawn, prepare to push it, and after, let's say, rook c1 check, you can go king d7, bishop to f4, preparing this rook here, but then you just go rook e7 check, king moves, and now you can just push d6, block the bishop's control of the c7 square, and whatever black plays, you will just go rook e8, let's say g5, you will check black, king g7, you will even capture here, and now you'll just move the king and win the game with your pass pawn. So one of the possibilities. But yeah, I mean, the game lasted for 111 moves, and we said that on move 53 it was already a completely winning endgame for Leela, simply a matter of technique, but Stockfish tortured her for 50 plus moves. So that's how you should approach chess. You should always torture your opponents and, you know, just give them hell, make them work for their meal. So a wonderful game, game 54 of the TCEC Superfinal Season 14. I'm very excited to see where this goes. Will Leela be able to win this match? Now she's currently 2 points in the lead ahead of Stockfish, which is really unreal. Because I don't know, up until last year, when Alpha Zero was released, we never even thought it possible for Stockfish to be defeated. Yes, okay, maybe in a game, but never in a match. So this is groundbreaking stuff, and a good time to be alive, you know, for chess. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Bernard Moore, Jan Mishkovsky, Berus, Joanna Hughes, and Andrea Grassoni for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with some more interesting content, checking up on Leela and continuing the Capablanca saga. And of course, follow the match between Leela and Stockfish live. The first thing you will see in the description below is a link to their match. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.